Having been praised among all shinobi, Kage and Jinchuriki alike as the greatest in godlike speed from his introduction in chapter 1 till his constant build-up 500 chapters later, dominating the strongest Akatsuki member, Minato Namikaze's heights seem to be endless, as I myself literally made the ultimate discussion of his true power, being over an hour long, and it would be in chapter 631 where Minato would unveil a KCM2 cloak, as to say if there were any limitations that you could put on him, they're just simply shattered. And many people, especially in the more Discord side of the community, tend to disregard much of his true power for their own unintentional ignorance. So today I'm going to go into a deeper, more advanced discussion about why KCM2 Minato is a literal monster among monsters. Reaching for 20k, so subscribe. During his days whilst alive, cutting through the shinobi darkness as a yellow flash and later the 4th Hokage, it's important to establish at least some baseline for just how strong Minato was before ever getting his KCM2 amp, and I have an entire video on this, so I'll just sum it up briefly. We know that both Minato and Naruto believe that Obito, who Minato had once fought, is of a power that Naruto would need KCM2 to actually defeat. And then once the war rolls around, this is basically just confirmed through both Obito and KCM2 Naruto's relativity. We know that by virtue of winning the battle of speed against Obito, he would hence scale above whatever reference point of Obito he is discussing, and this fits with how Warwick Kakashi can, in terms of pure combat speed, completely equal out White Mask Obito, and Minato would then go on to combo attack persistently alongside that Kakashi plus his Raikiri much later, despite that Minato being drained from being able to use Flying Raijin at least 70 times as a Jonin to 0 times with a KCM2 cloak. And then we have that cloak drained again, completely zapped off. So during the combo attack, he is demonstrably extremely fatigued, even more so than Kakashi just based on arguments alone. Furthermore, in more combat-oriented speeds, he can weave signs and put up a space-time barrier faster than Kurama's Bijou Bomb, which is equal to the Susanoo Arrow insofar as it is a blitz level above the user's base state, despite this Kurama being nearly 3 times the size of KCM2 Naruto's avatar. And remember, KCM2 as an avatar is just chakra, like how the real Kurama is just chakra, making Minato's sign weaving nearly a blitz level above KCM2 opponent in base. Again, if you want a more detailed explanation, it is linked below, although what's crucial is to note that anything ever performed by base Minato would also be able to be performed on a greater scale through KCM. It's just to what degree that truly is. Now this is where many people seem to overlook these natural implications just due to their particular preconceived notions. For example, after being revived in chapter 618, the regret of being unable to fulfill his duties as Hokage and the joy of being reunited with his son at last, full of conflicting thoughts, Minato heads to the site of the conflict alongside the other Hokage, showing glimpses of the mental conflict to come. However, despite this affliction, Minato would completely outspeed every Hokage at the end of chapter 630 and the beginning of chapter 631, making full use of his raw body flicker speed, where we see that Minato can actually teleport to a kunai that's being placed on the mainland with motion lines indicating the kunai arriving in that specific moment. Minato then pops into frame asking Naruto if he was late, although the Bijou Bomb is still on the mainland until after Minato lands there, it continues to wreak havoc until it teleports to a previously placed marked kunai on a rock off the mainland that had to have been placed prior to arriving at the mainland. Therefore, Minato teleported to the bomb first, then to the mainland, then the bomb moved locations. So Minato actually did blitz his own Flying Raijin timer. Minato, during his time in the Pure Lands, has made peace with Kurama despite their previous conflicts, and is now able to make use of his chakra. The yellow flash of Konoha illuminates the battlefield once more, shining brighter after death than he ever did while alive. Therefore, you would hence be stacking KCM2 onto that subspace outspeeding ability. However, it's also important to note that just by virtue of Minato's preset power prior to obtaining KCM2, his amp necessarily has to be proportionally less than that of Naruto, although there should at least be some amp. Though less, it is still just due to the exponentially greater amount of reserves in comparison to Naruto. And one detail that's commonly missed is that when Minato seals Kurama, his point of splitting it was that such a quantity of chakra would just be too much for an infant, so he literally had to shrink it to the maximum capacity for it not to overwhelm Naruto, which is why once Minato seals his half, only a third of Kurama is left over, hence why Dark Kurama refers to Naruto's Kurama as the leftover half. So at least his reserves are just much higher concerning Kurama alone, although the amp from his base state to the avatar is, which is for sure close to a blitz level. But pocket that for now, as let's just address for something like the second Hokage Tobirama outspeeding a dazed Minato, another term to return to later. Minato, just by virtue of having a greater body flicker and base and now a greater surplus of chakra capable of being allocated to his feet, would just be able to perform this feat as well. Other examples like KCM Minato and Tobirama reacted in absolute synchronicity. Minato now has techniques to further enhance that and how you'd be able to capitalize on this equal reaction like in his avatar, which wasn't erected at all throughout the days. No surprise there. This avatar would also hence allow for Minato to have a greater capitalization on reaction speeds beyond even Tobirama, who, for example, is quite impressive throughout the war, like in later parts being able to mentally react to an alive Rinnegan Madara, whose Sage Mode sensory would actually be critical in aiding his reaction against Tobirama, as we have Databook 4 noting that Naruto's sensory is even exceptional against the Ten Tails version of Madara, and it alone allows for him to peer into the structure of the world itself, seeing its literal laws and making them allies. His sensory allows for him to literally see metaphysical constructs, perhaps external to the mind, but regardless, you can just use examples like the second Tsuchikage Lord Mu being the fastest old gen Kage due to his sensory. He is the only Kage to react to the surprise hands, completely evading it due to sensory, yet Tobirama with just his neurotransmitters can react to Madara's attack. Then, Minato in KCM2 could also just do this, if not even more so, as we see that KCM2 Naruto's avatar can completely catch Madara and slam him into the ground, and while yes, he was robbed of movement, the Susanoo, like with what Minato or Naruto could ever do if they were paralyzed, could just completely move around for him. Yet his sensory couldn't block this tail swipe, and if you've noticed thus far, I've continually applied superiority to Minato in their KCM2 states. Why is that? After exiting his days, realizing his true success lies within his son after all, Minato would then bump fists with Naruto and go on to show how his avatar is actually even beyond KCM2 Naruto's respective avatar, just by virtue of that which he did when fighting alongside BSM Naruto's avatar, which was outperformed by Minato's base KCM2 state. So just what kind of a multiplier or amp does Sage Mode even offer at this point in the series? Well, many people have argued that it's at least a 10 times multiplier, as Sage Mode is the reference form to CM2, with Databook's descriptions for its originator, Jugo, being Jugo absorbs the natural energy overflowing from Earth, transforming into a ferocious sage. Yeah, and CM2 is literally stated to be a 10 times multiplier for Jirobo, although that's actually only stated to be pretty much just for his chakra in particular, which is also befitting with how just a few chapters after that, Kidomaru goes CM1, and Neji describes it as his chakra going from normal to hyperactive, as is to say whatever chakra quality that is innate to the curse mark causes the chakra to rile itself up for it to be either used in a greater quantity or potency. In the aforementioned example, we know that Kidomaru was beginning to slowly overwhelm Neji and is making subtle mental notes about him just holding back, which his fellow Sound 4 comrades commentate on, stating that if he does go into that form, his opponent will be dead in no time, as if to say that this chakra amp that's potentially a 10 times is a tier difference at least. Furthermore, to support the 10 times number through a chakra change, we know that Sage Mode in principle is also a chakra dependent amp, as when Jiraiya is in Sage Mode, which is either equal to or even slightly inferior to that of Naruto's, gains access to his giant flame bombs, which are just through a chakra amplification and are exactly 10 times the size of his typical ones, as said in Databook 3. Regardless, we can always just assert that Minato is not directly a Sage Mode level above KCM2 Naruto's avatar, but at least of a tier where he can outperform KCM2 Naruto, who stacked Sage Mode creating BSM. We see that both are slamming the Rasengan into Jubito and multiple chakra arms. Naruto has one chakra arm extended and blocks the other, but it does still catch his tail. Minato, on the other hand, deals with two chakra arms, knocking away both at the same time. This would literally mean that the sheer power of his avatar state would be able to knock away at least 6 Biju bombs, and potentially even twice as much, depending on how much of an amp you do view the Sage Mode initially, using a single tail swipe. If you are going to be critical of this entire line of scaling, the Naruto birthday columns actually make note that while Minato is slowly exiting the days and Naruto is adding Sage Mode to KCM2, the two men can understand one another without having to say a single word, something Naruto and Sasuke recognize from their battles at the Final Valley, which would also support Minato, while still being somewhat nerfed, is a tier relative to a peak KCM2 Naruto, and potentially more due to Senjutsu, but that's besides the point. And we also get even crazier as we consider that the bomb-slapping Naruto was the weakest form of KCM2 Naruto's avatar. Minato would also then hint skill to the avatar, outspeeding even White Mask Obito, forcing him to use Kamui using just the arm constructs, and his near equal rival in Edo Madara, who he can jump alongside, react equally to, and fire not only fire style but also MS projectiles out at the exact same speed, meaning Minato can literally be argued to be a significant level above even characters like White Mask Obito and Edo Madara. And for either, there isn't really any argument to suggest that they would be above Minato in physical stats, much less in the avatar state, which is fundamentally equal to the Susanoo in its proportional stat increases, meaning that Minato is much faster and stronger than both Obito and Madara. And while you might suggest that Naruto's proficiency and understanding of how to use the avatar is better, we do see that he does use more arms and whatnot, but Minato can actually land on his feet after the Rasengan blowback when Naruto couldn't, for example. Or one may posit that he couldn't even kill Madara due to the Edo Tensei, or Obito due to the Kamui. But we know that sealing ninjutsu transcends both, with Minato's original fight being a good example of this, as I've highlighted before. And we know that dealing with large bodies of chakra is strenuous, but Minato's chakra pool is now much greater, and therefore the chakra at which he can allocate to the seal would be much greater. And he was already able to seal the largest part of the entire Ten Tails, being Kurama. And for those who don't know, Kurama was actually carrying a lot of Naruto's chakra reserves for most of the entire war, which is what Kurama notes to Naruto in the final valley. So saying that he could either seal Obito or Madara away in this state is pretty conservative, which all goes to show the caliber of shinobi that Minato is at by this point. For example, if you want to put Hashirama into the mix, we know that KCM2 would make his body flicker at least somewhat faster than whenever he blitzed him to the battlefield, despite being potentially conflicted, and we also know that Minato in every single one of his fights opens it in one of two manners: blitzing instantly with body flicker, or spreading FTG kunai across the entire battlefield to then fly around everywhere, which he could do potentially 70 times while a jonin. So now imagine the reserves of KCM2 Minato. My point is that no matter what war art combatant you put up, at least pre-6 pass, KCM2 Minato needs to absolutely be in the discussion against Prime EMS Madara, Prime Seijuman Hashirama. He could also literally solo every single non-Hokage Kage at the same time, dominate each first day shinobi platoon front, etc. I mean, just imagine the 8th gate guy feat, but with KCM stacked to it actually at full power. He's not just some acclimated EMS Sasuke, Edo Tobirama, or KCM 1.5 level fighter. But why do people think that? Minato's true power, in which I've laid out thus far, seemed to be omitted through most of the war. Why was he fighting alongside those aforementioned combatants? And well, it's simple. Minato had finally realized that perhaps putting Konoha's prosperity over everything wasn't the best for the village. He entrusted everything to his son, Naruto, walking ahead of his fellow Konoha comrades, giving up his life for the sake of the village. However, that left Naruto with what? Nothing. No money, no food, no childhood, but instead being ostracized for Minato's very judgment, and from the moment he sliced open the masked man to see what truly was, he was devastated. Everything Minato had built was destroyed by, dare I say, his other son. Minato enters through what the 4th data book calls a stupor or daze, and it's commonly referred to in chapters 637 to 642, where we see that Minato performs very lackadaisically considering his true power, due to Obito completely shattering the fragile pieces of his mind, as we mentioned just prior, even just as soon as he was revived essentially. And while many people are quick to jump on what this daze actually is, equating it to just some sadness or a minor temporary depression, this couldn't be further from the truth. And the original kanji, this term motion or mushin, I don't know, means something akin to stupor, a mind completely blank with shock, loss of the spirit. Some have even translated it to be like it's as if his soul has left his body, which all does explain why we see that the level of stupor Minato was under was so much that he only reacts to the fastest speeds on the battlefield, and anything below that are just awkwardly ignored. We see that he acts normal, at least outwardly, but each time he interacts with Obito, he visualizes what once was. Each and every time, he realizes the guilt for not recognizing the eyes under the mask on that very day. He realizes that his mark on life was erased by his own disciple. Every one of his reactionary text bubbles all possess ellipses, either solely or prior to an exclamation point, indicating that there is literally a delay in his brain. And when Obito places the TSO on Minato's shoulder after tormenting him mentally, he would go on to react to it, but would only truly react when Tobirama's peak body flicker speed blitzed it and grabbed it, where Minato would then change his posture and facial expression. And even after the bomb goes off and Tobirama rejoins the squad, he's still staring off in the wrong direction entirely. Minato's completely out of it. Minato would finally come to realize that his mark on life did not die at the hands of Obito, but continued to live on in his son, Naruto, where father and son joined their fists, standing together against the threat to the shinobi world. What roused the broken Minato from despair wasn't Obito or even Minato himself, it was his son Naruto, who had grown into a first-class shinobi. He's not an infant anymore, something Dark Kurama points out, alongside pointing out that Kushina's death and Kurama being sealed into Naruto were neither Minato's fault nor a bad thing. The fist bump truly was the moment that gave potential for the healing of Minato's mind, and once they combo attack, the healing is finally actualized and Minato's true power in KCM2 is revealed. So when you see people try to argue that Minato in KCM2 is below characters like KCM 1.5, Naruto, and despite being above in base, probably just don't understand really anything fundamental about the story of Naruto. Minato isn't just some EMS Sasuke or Tobirama level threat in his KCM2 form, he's a totally different animal. We see that in literally every main example of a master-student battle, there are some mental afflictions affecting power. Hiruzen versus Orochimaru, Jiraiya versus Pain, Kakashi versus Sasuke, you name it. But what did you guys think? I figured I wanted to shed some light on Minato's war arc performances and why he is actually much stronger than what he ever really got to show. Literally mentally nerfed for over 30 chapters and still has flashback thoughts and mental trials about both Obito and Kushina after that. But anyway, if you guys did enjoy, then subscribe. It'd be greatly appreciated. Commissions are open as well if you are wanting a very specific topic of your own, but more importantly than that, may God bless you all. Love you guys.